Hi, my name is Fred Wheeler. I run the How to D&D YouTube channel, and this is the Lost Mine of Phandelver Dungeon Master tutorial. This is Lesson 6, Wave Echo Cave, Part 1. In this, I will be covering Area 1 through to 10. I will not be covering the entire thing. It's just too much to cover in one sitting. So therefore, I have split it up into two halves. So the purpose for like all of this is to ensure that you get a good overview of how to find Wave Echo Cave, or how the players can go about finding Wave Echo Cave, role-playing the monsters. There's an ochre jelly, some sturges, skeletons, ghouls, how to explore Wave Echo Cave, or how to deal with actually adjudicating it, how to defeat monsters or deal with them. And then, of course, the primary goal is to rescue the Rockseeker brothers. And, of course, one of them is already dead, but there is one still alive. The players don't necessarily know this, and then reclaiming the mine and defeating the black spider is all part and parcel of this. Now, like all of the tutorials that I do, the intention here is to explain as I go and demonstrate as much as possible, but also, like everything that I do here on Lighthall, is to allow you the opportunity to participate. That means if you have a webcam or a microphone, you don't have to have a webcam. You could just do it by voice. But if you do, you can join in the second half and actually play through with me part of this adventure, or the section of this adventure. This is the whole purpose of these classes, is to give you a much more practical experience, something outside of what I've done on YouTube, even though I've done a lot of stuff about the Lost Mine of Phandelver on YouTube. Now, one of the things that you'll discover with everything that I do is that I encourage you to ask questions as we go, or at the end. That's up to you. There will be a Q&A section. I will allow about an hour to play through to ensure that we get as much of it done as possible. Not necessarily all of it, but as much as we can in that hour. So I will try to be fairly quick about everything so that you get everything that you need. And as I said, feel free to ask any kind of questions you might have, because that's the reason that I'm here in the first place, is to answer questions. Okay, so the first thing we need to deal with, like all of the things that we deal with, is like, how do you find this location? How do the player characters find Wave Echo Cave? Now, there's a couple of different ways. They can find it through Gundren Rockseeker's map. The map actually shows you how to get to Wave Echo Cave. And if you look at the adventure on page 41, you'll see that that is spelled out. If they manage to save Gundren Rockseeker, then he knows how to get to the mining cave. He knows how to get to Wave Echo Cave. So there's probably the easiest way to get there. Now, any of the doppelgangers know the location of Wave Echo Cave, as they work for Nesna, the black spider. That's provided that they have been able to capture them and they are still alive. If they're around and they've interrogated them, they would be able to give that information. Including King Groll. Now, King Groll has the map. He's looked at the map, so he knows how to get to Wave Echo Cave as well. Now, there are some backups here, since none of that's necessarily guaranteed. Rudolph I feel like calling him Rudolph the reindeer, frankly, but Rudolph the druid can take the party to the cave, but there's a favor. Yeah, they have to deal with a dragon. It's a pretty big ask, considering, so it may not be the best way to go about doing anything. Now, Agatha the Banshee's been around for a very long time. She knows the location of Wave Echo Cave, but the player's characters need to have something valuable, like a piece of jewelry. She likes pretty things, and then to convince her to answer a question. Now, part of the adventure with Agatha is they are provided with a piece of jewelry, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't use another piece of jewelry if they have one accessible, which potentially they might. So you have an opportunity here to use another piece of jewelry, or potentially buy a piece of jewelry to give to her to convince her to answer a question, particularly since the quest with Agatha, it generally has a different focus. You're supposed to be trying to figure out where the spell book is. Now, the last possibility should be pretty obvious, but I'll say it anyway. The bugbears in the Red Brand hideout also work for Nesna the Black Spider, So that means if they manage to capture them and interrogate them, they can find out the location of Wave Echo Cave from them. So you don't despair. There are plenty of ways that they can find that location if you want them to find that location. It's not like it's going to be impossible to do. So you've got plenty of tools at your disposal. And of course, there's the opportunity to always make up something yourself if you feel that's not going to work. And that's always a possibility. Sometimes things don't work out, and that's how it is. Now, I'm going to say a little bit about the random table. There's a random wandering monster table. Now, I know some people don't like the wandering monster tables that are put out. Personally, I'm not fond of Wizards of the Coast in the way that they do them. So I'm going to give you some recommendations, and then I'm going to move on and explain to you sort of how I would adjust things and go about doing a couple of things. I may not answer all your questions. So these are only recommendations for the wandering monster table. Wandering monster tables have a very specific purpose. They are designed to make a location feel like they are alive. They're also very much a tool for a dungeon master to stop silly players having their characters taking a short and a long rest in the middle of a dungeon or a cave where there's lots of dangerous things. So that's essentially what it is. What I will say, though, when I looked at this wandering monster table, is that there's too many monsters. I would recommend removing the Grick. It's a terrible monster. It doesn't do anything particularly interesting. Zombies don't really wander around. Unless you give them instructions, they don't usually wander around. They just stay put and wait for something to move into the location. Skeletons don't usually wander around unless they're given a specific instruction. So they're not really a patrolling monster or a wandering monster. They just sort of sit in one location and wait. Now, because, as I said, these really aren't wandering monsters, you don't have to exclude them. And I feel free to take more away if you feel that there only needs to be like a handful, like one or two. That's fine. But yes, I think there are just too many different types of monsters. The one that I think you're probably going to find makes the most sense is the ghoul, which is why I've got the image of the ghoul up. That is the only one that I could think of that actually makes sense that you might have wandering around. And I suppose you could say bugbears because Nesna has bugbears in this location. But is it really going to be patrolling? It's too dangerous to just be wandering around this location when it's full of undead creatures. Okay, if the player's characters take a short or long rest inside Wave Echo Cave, then select or roll randomly for a wandering monster without rolling the D20 dice. Now, I know the instructions say you roll a 20-sided dice to determine whether there's a wandering monster. My advice to you is if they take a long time down here, by all means, follow the adventure's instructions. But if they take a short rest, an hour to rest somewhere, just decide what part of that short rest. Is it going to be in the first half, the second half of the short rest, and something shows up? Because that's just a way of stopping them from doing that sort of thing. That doesn't mean they couldn't take a short rest while exploring this location, but not in Wave Echo Cave. They need to go away from the cave somewhere safe. Long rest, again, I would just roll a 8-sided dice that determines sort of what hour the monsters show up, or just decide when they show up. You don't have to do it randomly, but that sort of stops your players from using this location as a resting location when it's actually too dangerous to be doing so. That would be my advice to you with regard to the wandering monster table. Now, let's go through the different locations. I'm going to have the map up. I'm going to use a pen. I'm going to point things out as I go. And I guess the key thing for me is if I miss something or there's something I don't answer, you need to pipe up and let me know so that I can answer those questions for you. So we're going to start off with Area 1. This is the first location, the entrance to Wave Echo Cave where they first come in. If I got light coming in the wrong place, no, it's all good. Okay, so the first thing with this location is when they get here, read out or paraphrase the box text. As always, as I said, make sure to ask players what they want to do. There is a dead body here. It is one of the Rockseeker brothers. If Gudrun is with the party, you can have him played as being quite emotional about the fact that one of his brothers is dead. He might want to take Theoden back to town right away, and you might continue on, or your party might continue on. or the party might decide to go back to town and then come back later. It's up to you. Now, the other thing they might wind up finding is that Gundren wants to continue with the group and rescue his other brother, who isn't, as far as they can tell, dead at this present time because they didn't find his body. So Nundro might still be alive, and Gundren might want to travel with him. So feel free to do that if you want to. Now, there is kind of a big question here, and I'm going to give you a rather long list of different items because it says here there's a lot of mining and dwarven supplies, but it doesn't really spell out everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a huge list, write down the things that you like, exclude the things you don't like, and add in anything else that you think should be there. Now, I am a big proponent of giving player characters mundane items, things that they can use that are useful, that aren't magical, that aren't gold, but still have a use in the game. And this is to get players to use their brain outside of just the character sheet. So I'm going to suggest these items: 4 sacks of flour, 2 bags of salt, 4 casks of salted meat, 3 bull's eye lanterns, 6 flasks of lamp oil, 3 pickaxes, 3 shovels, an abacus, 4 empty barrels, 3 bed rolls, 4 buckets. You need buckets when you're mining. You need some sort of pan. A box of 20 candles, a box of 10 pieces of chalk, 4 lengths of 50-foot hemp rope, silk if you would prefer, 2 crowbars, a grappling hook, 3 hammers, 2 sledgehammers, a hunting trap, a mess kit for eating, a box of 10 pitons for climbing, a 10-foot pole, 3 signal whistles, a box of 20 bars of soap, got to stay clean, right? 10 iron spikes, a tinder box, a box of 20 torches, 2 tents, 3 water skins, and a whetstone. Now, that's a lot of stuff. You don't have to use all of it, okay? Feel free to no, Fred, it's way too much. I don't need that much. That's fine. You don't have to use all of it. I'm just putting them forward as things that I think you will find useful and your players will find useful in some way. Okay, so now area 2, which is kind of this area here. All through here, this is area 2. It's basically a bit of a maze. So when they get here, I want you to read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. Now, navigating through here can be a bit confusing. You might want to just use a piece of paper and draw things out as they go and just look at your map. You don't have to draw out a proper map, just do like a line drawing. That way they get an idea of which way they can go. This is what you can see. This is how far you can see. And it makes it a lot quicker and easier to navigate through this area rather than trying to draw it out properly like on a battle grid or anything like that. You might find that to be a pain. The orc jelly that is meant to stalk the player's characters is not particularly stealthy. It's not a stealth monster, but it would be lurking on the ceiling waiting to drop onto a lone character if that ever occurs. Now, what you'll find is if the party's moving together, it's probably never going to attack them. This monster may never get used. Now, its ability, it's got blind sight, which means that it can sense creatures right up to about here. If I position it right there, it can sense creatures right up to about here. 60 feet blind sight is quite a long way, right? So that means that it can sense things from quite a distance. That means it can maneuver itself around. It moves very slow. It's not a particularly exciting monster unless the players are using slashing weapons, and then things get really complicated. An ochre jelly can go unnoticed in darkness. So certainly using a stealth check would be appropriate, or even dim light. Even if a player character has dark vision, this creature can still hide in dim light. But it's probably very easy to spot in bright light. So if they decide to carry a torch in here, they're probably going to see this thing straight away, particularly if it is trying to hide in dead ends and stuff like that. So if they get line of sight on it and there's bright light, then it's going to show up, even if it's on the ceiling. I mean, it's up to you. Maybe they don't look up. Maybe they do look up. I mean, it's up to you. Ask the players for their marching order, primarily because this is a maze of passages, and it's mostly to help determine who is in the front and who is in the back of the group, because they'll be traveling pretty much single file. Well, not quite. This map is not to scale. So each square actually represents a 5-foot square, 10-foot square rather than a 5-foot square. So one of the things that you'll find is you cannot print this map to scale. It would be 8 feet long, as I have discovered. So not possible to do, totally impractical. And even printing it out at the size that I have, it's still way too big. So even though things look crammed, that's because this map should be much bigger than it is. Okay, so the reason is we're doing the marching order is because we need to know who's in the front, who's in the back of the group, and this is to help us decide who gets to make a perception check, or when we apply passive perception to notice the ooze. Okay, that's the only reason to be using a marching order of some kind. And ultimately their position, if they split up, great, then the monster will do something. Otherwise, this monster is probably never going to do anything particularly interesting. Even if they do fight it, most players figure out that they shouldn't be using slashing weapons pretty quickly once it starts splitting, and then they'll start doing something else. Okay, so area 3, which is a pretty simple little area. There's not much to area 3. It's right over here. You'll notice these dice. I do not have 10 Sturge miniatures, okay? So I'm using dice in this case. So area 3 is quite a large area. Read out or paraphrase the box text when they enter this area, and then make sure you ask the players what they want to do. My advice is just follow the instructions that the adventure gives, but yes, it is possible for 10 Sturges to potentially surround a single player character. But you can have 9 of them surrounding from all sides, and then 1 from above, because the ceiling's high enough to allow that. Now, the only problem with Sturges, even if you are level 4, if the Sturges do surround one player character and they get surprise on the party or that player character, and they also get a high initiative, which is possible, the character's likely to become unconscious or die before they even get to act in combat, even at level 4. Sturges are pretty nasty, and the reality is that once they attach themselves, they can continue to do damage without having to roll to hit. And that's one of the biggest factors, is once they finally do attach themselves, they can cause problems. Their attack bonus is very low. It's not that great. So therefore, there's a good chance that they won't actually attach themselves, provided your players have a high armor class and the dungeon master doesn't roll too high. Okay, so area 4, you'll be probably wondering, like, area 4 looks pretty cramped here. Remember, this map is not to scale. It would be impossible to do so. It's full of skeletons, right? So I'm going to come back to a lot of your questions that you're putting forward right now. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about them, but I'm going to just keep barreling through here so I get it all done. Okay, so do still keep asking the questions. Don't stop, please. When they get to this door and open it, like, just read out or paraphrase the box text as normal. Ask the players what to do. There are 9 skeletons. It seems like a lot for the group, but the group will be fine. 9 skeletons is fine. It's not a big deal. The best strategy for dealing with skeletons, and actually I shouldn't have mentioned, when it comes to Sturges, the best way to deal with Sturges is frankly fireball, but anything that does area effect damage. If your players have something that does area effect damage, even if it winds up hitting the players' characters, Sturges don't have a lot of hit points. It's often area effect that does a little bit of damage. It's the most effective way of getting rid of them. Okay, so back to the skeletons. The best strategy for dealing with a skeleton is to use bludgeoning weapon attacks, because this monster is vulnerable to them. That means that you wind up doing double the damage, which is excellent. Any character class that has the turn undead ability, such as a cleric or your paladins, some paladins have that ability as well, or just flee. If they can't handle it, player's best strategy is to flee, come back and deal with it another day. Consider adding some loot to the room or information to find, like say a diary. I think there's nothing wrong with adding a diary by all means. This location is an old guard room, so it makes sense there might be old diaries, but they might be well and truly disintegrated by now. What I do highly recommend is that you add some sort of adventuring gear from page 150 of the player's handbook. I have not given you a list because I want you to think, what would guards have in their barracks? And I want you to come up with some ideas. I've just given you the page and the suggestion to do so. You don't have to pick a lot, but I would suggest picking something. Okay, Area 5, which is over here. Area 5 is it's not a huge location. Its purpose is really odd. I frankly don't know too much about a assayer's office. But when they open the door to here, read out or paraphrase the box text, as always, ask the players what they want to do. If the players' characters can't open the strong box when they do find the strong box, and hopefully they do, because that DC is quite high, consider letting them try something else. Now, the players' characters can take the strong box with them and try and open it at another time. Maybe when they level up again, you decide that they can retry a lockpick check on it to try and get it open. But it's not appropriate at their present level because they failed this time round. So it's not common practice to allow players to continue to keep rolling the dice till they finally succeed on a check. But you might find, primarily because if that were the case, why would you bother rolling the dice? Okay, so if you're going to have them rolling dice and you're going to use a DC, and it's a high DC, so I'm not saying get rid of the DC at all. What I'm saying is that maybe you want to wait until their proficiency bonus goes up, or they gain another level, and that sort of equates to they become more skilled, because their proficiency bonus doesn't have to go up to indicate that they are more skilled. Just time has to pass. Okay, there is a reason why there's an acid vial in the player's handbook as gear. It can be used to get a lock open. You pour the acid in, and it eats away at the lock, and then you can get the strong box open. Breaking the box open with a crowbar might require a strength check. I've set the DC at 25. The reason for this is that we don't want to make the DC lower or the same as picking the box. That doesn't make sense. It should be easier to pick the box than to break it open if it's a proper strong box, correct? So that's why I've done it that way. If they don't have a crowbar, they won't get advantage. If they do have a crowbar, they will have advantage on that check. If they fail, then they won't be able to try it until whenever time you think is suitable. Bashing the thing open with a weapon, a bashing weapon, could smash the box open. You make an attack roll. The AC on a strong box would be about 19. You will probably assign it about 10 hit points, so they could just break it open. It's up to you whether you think that's something. You don't have to do it this way, okay? If you're looking for the information on the armor class for items and boxes and so forth, and assigning hit points to an object, then the page 246 to 247 of the Dungeon Master's Guide will have that information for you. Okay, so that's Area 6, the assayer's office. Now, what is an assayer? It's basically somebody who looks after money. It's a money counter. So if you're wondering what that was, I learned that from somebody else's video. Thank you very much, Matthew. Okay, so Area 6 is the South Barracks. So when they open either this door or this door, you're going to read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. It's pretty obvious what's going to happen because what's in here is probably going to leap on them and jump on them pretty quickly. There's not going to be a lot of mucking around. I would consider there an opportunity to listen at the door and discover that there's some sort of munching noises going on behind there. Okay. The ghoul's best ability is the claw attack that can paralyze its victim. So lead with this ability and keep using it. Don't use the bite. The bite is when you're dead and it's now deciding to eat you. But till then, the claws are used until you are no longer able to fight back. And yes, ghouls do drag their meals away if they want to. Now, this makes a ghoul really nasty, and ghouls are supposed to be nasty. There are only 3 in this location, and level 4 characters, a reasonable sized group, shouldn't have too much trouble, even if somebody does get paralyzed. The best strategy for dealing with a ghoul is always to use ranged attacks and turn undead, of course, and then, of course, fleeing, because, I mean, ghouls will chase you down, but you're the dungeon master, so you can decide how far they chase. Okay, they don't necessarily have to catch up. So that's area 6. Right, area 7, which is this area right here, it actually includes this room as well. Okay, so it's a large area. It's got a very specific purpose. Surprisingly, it goes right against the concept of how you deal with exploring a cavern or a cave or a dungeon. But it is there and it does have a purpose. So when they get in here and open this door, you're going to read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. This room is very self-explanatory. The room is intended to be used as a place to rest for the players' characters in this cave complex. Okay, they can use furniture or something to block the door. It actually states that in the adventure. They could bar the door with something. It is designed for them to rest in this location here with these barrels. So by all means, do so. Allow them to do that if they decide to do that. If they decide to leave the cave and come back later, then so be it, they do it that way. But this is the only really safe place to take a short rest or a long rest, provided they barricade the door or bar the door with the bar. That's the whole purpose behind it. That's area 7, the ruined storeroom. Okay, area 8, the fungi cavern. This is actually a environmental hazard trap. This whole location here is number 8. And it's not completely obvious what you're supposed to do with this. You kind of have to read a little bit between the lines, but when they get to about here, you're going to read out or paraphrase. They might come from one of two directions, but most likely they're going to be coming from this direction here. Read out or paraphrase the box text. Ask the players what they want to do. Make sure to describe the location clearly so they get all the information they need, because that information is vital for them determining on what they do and how successful they are at achieving it. Although the map doesn't indicate that the fungus covers the majority of the floor, because there's only green patches here, it does. You're going to assume that it does from the text that is provided for you, even though the map doesn't have it. So when you describe it, please, if you draw it out, make sure that you say, look, there's something growing. There's this matted green stuff or fungi all over the floor. There are small patches that aren't, but most of it, the majority of the floor. So although it doesn't have it on the map. The room is a slow-acting environmental trap. This means that players are meant to avoid and take a different path when discovered. So whoever steps onto it first, you can have them make the check for the environmental trap, the fungus, and its effect. And that means that hopefully the rest of the party won't have to deal with that. You may decide as a dungeon master, you're going to wait until everybody enters the area before you ask for the check. Frankly, I don't think it really matters which way you do it. It's really up to you. It is an environmental trap, so it's not like it's going to take them down. Normally, this is only set in place to whittle down their resources. It's a resource consumption trap, but it's also designed to be avoided. So this is why I'm suggesting maybe the first person to step onto it, or first couple of people to step onto it, make the checks first, so that the others can tell that there's something up. Consider giving the players' characters advantage or even automatic success on their Constitution saving throw if they cover their mouth and their nose, or they hold their breath. I think either one of those would be fine. So that's area 8, the fungi cavern. Area 9 is an enormous cavern. It's an enormous location. To give you an idea of just how large this area is, it's basically all of this. That whole area is area 9, which is the Great Cavern. So when they can enter from a couple of different locations. They're either going to enter from here or here, depending on which route they take. Read out or paraphrase the box text. Ask the players what they would like to do. There are ghouls. So the lurking ghouls have a chance to ambush the party of characters. So roll a 20-sided dice and add their stealth modifier, which is a +2 for the stealth check. And that will give you an idea of how hard they are to find. So I'm going to do that right now. So ghouls, and you can actually do this in advance. You don't have to do it at the time. One of the smartest things you can ever do when you're running your game is to pre-roll a lot of stuff so you don't have to do it during the game. Just saves time. I'm doing it for you here because I know there might be some people who are very new to the game and they need to set. So 2 is our stealth modifier. Why is it 2? That is their dexterity modifier. So that's all we have. They don't actually have stealth as a trained skill. Roll a 20-sided dice. I rolled a 5. So 2 plus 5 is 7. So you'll find that if you're using a passive check for any of the pre-made characters, that they're probably going to notice the ghouls with a check like that. It's a very low. They have to get equal to or greater than to notice the ghouls, and the ghouls need to get greater than the perception check or the persuasion passive perception of the characters to actually avoid being noticed. Now, again, that's going to change if they take a light source with them. Then it makes it much more difficult for ghouls to actually hide. But if there's darkness and they haven't brought a light source, then definitely use a stealth check and look at surprise as a possibility. So how does this work? I kind of just explained it. Compare the ghoul's stealth check, which in this case is 7, because that's what I got, with the player character's passive perception, if you're using that, or an active perception check, if you decide to use that, depending on what seems appropriate. Okay, this is how we determine surprise. Surprise essentially just means if you are surprised, you do not act in your first round. At the end of your turn, if you are surprised, you get your reaction back. That's it. It's as simple as that. 7 ghouls can be a deadly fight with paralyzing claw attacks. So allow player characters to flee if they need to. Again, I've already explained to you the best strategy for dealing with ghouls, and it doesn't change whether it's this room or this room. It's pretty much the same sort of thing. The last location is pretty simple too. I would say this pull here, the number 10, the dark pull, when they get here, there's a couple of different routes they could take. The most likely route is through here, okay? But just read out, paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. It's not actually necessary for a player character to make a perception check, okay, to find anything here. Just stating that they search or investigate the pool of water will allow them to find the treasure on the skeleton in the pool. So if they get into the water and have a look around, or they decide that they're going to stick their head in the water and look around in there, if they've got a light source, that'll help it. It's not deep water. It's 10 feet deep. You know what I mean? It's not like it requires a swim check of any kind. It's definitely, it's like getting into a swimming pool, a small, swimming pool, not an Olympic swimming pool. It's a small one. So that's what would be my suggestion. I am reluctant to encourage you to make dice rolls that are easy or very easy. So very easy is 5 and easy is 10. Often I think you'll find that it is better to avoid those dice rolls and simply look for what the player characters want to do. So this is the end of part 1 of Wave Echo Cave, and I will be covering areas 11 to 20 in part 2 of Wave Echo Cave.